They saw a frail old woman. Gray hair, weathered hands, quiet as a shadow. At 65, Elena Morales looked like someone's grandmother wandering into the wrong place. The young recruits laughed. They whispered. They made jokes about retirement homes and paperwork. She stood there, silent and still, while boots stomped past her and voices mocked what they thought was weakness. But here's what they didn't know. That old woman had survived things they couldn't imagine. Those steady eyes had seen combat zones they'd only read about. Those worn hands had saved lives while theirs were still learning to tie shoelaces. And when a decorated colonel walked across that yard, stopped dead in his tracks, and bowed his head to her, everything they thought they knew shattered in an instant. Because some warriors don't retire. They just wait for the world to finally see them. Subscribe to USX Stories. Boots struck the concrete in uneven rhythms, sharp and careless, echoing across the open yard. Somewhere behind her, metal clattered, a locker slammed, and a laugh burst out. Too loud, too deliberate. It carried, bouncing off the walls, followed by a low murmur of voices that didn't bother to hide their tone. "Wrong building, ma'am," someone said, the word ma'am dripping with condescension. Another snorted. A few heads turned. A few more didn't, but their shoulders shook all the same. The looks came next. Quick glances, slow smirks, the kind that judged before asking a single question. An elderly woman, out of place, out of time, clearly confused. She stood where she was, hands relaxed at her sides, eyes forward. Her posture was calm, almost too calm, as if the noise around her didn't exist. Every word landed, but nothing showed. No flinch, no reaction, just quiet breathing and stillness in the middle of a storm of casual cruelty. People stared, waiting for her to shuffle away, to apologize, to ask for directions. She did none of it, and somehow that made the laughter feel uglier, heavier, harder to ignore. If you were 65 and standing there, would you have stayed? Her name was Elena Morales. She was 65 years old, officially listed as a new logistics and coordination specialist. Paperwork, scheduling, inventory tracking. The kind of role no one paid much attention to unless something went wrong. On paper, she was unremarkable. No visible decorations. No dramatic backstory anyone bothered to ask about. Just another name in a long column of civilian contractors. She stood slightly apart from the others, not out of fear, but habit. Her posture was straight without being stiff, shoulders relaxed despite her age, weight balanced evenly on both feet. She wore her uniform neatly, no extra flair, no visible personalization. Sleeves rolled just enough to be practical, boots clean but clearly worn in. Nothing about her looked new, even though everything about her assignment Schnickly was. Her eyes were what most people noticed second. Dark, steady, observant. They didn't dart around nervously like some of the younger recruits. They didn't challenge anyone either. They simply took things in, slow and deliberate, like she was counting details no one else thought mattered. She moved quietly, not shuffling, not uncertain, just without waste. Every step landed softly, controlled. When she shifted her weight, it was smooth. When she turned, she did it fully. Not halfway. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly into a practical bun. Not stylish, just functional. No makeup, no jewelry, no visible tattoos. Not yet. When people looked at her, they saw age. They saw silence. They saw someone who didn't interrupt or assert or take up space. They saw someone's grandmother, someone easy to overlook. And so they did. Logistics. One of the men had said earlier, squinting at her name patch. "So you're here to organize our filing cabinets." A few chuckles followed. Not mean, just careless. "They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now," someone else had added. "What's next, high schoolers?" She hadn't responded, just nodded once, like the comment hadn't landed. Elena was smaller than most of them, more compact now with age. Narrow shoulders, lean build, quiet presence. The kind of person who blended into a crowd without trying. A group nearby was talking loudly about weekend leave, about a new training course, about who had messed up a drill last week. Their voices rose and fell like waves. Elena stood just close enough to hear, just far enough not to be part of it. Every now and then, someone glanced at her, then looked away. "Does she even know where she is?" a voice muttered. Another smirked. "Probably got off at the wrong stop." They weren't cruel. They didn't shove her. They didn't yell. It was worse than that. They dismissed her, treated her like background noise, like a piece of furniture that had always been there. When a sergeant passed by, he didn't address her, didn't ask her name, didn't check her file. He nodded to the others, said a few words, and walked on. She didn't chase after him. Elena shifted her stance slightly, adjusting her balance. Her eyes tracked movement. Not people, but patterns. How many steps between the gate and the building? Which boots made more noise? Which voices carried farther? Where shadows fell at this time of day? It looked like the wandering attention of someone elderly. It wasn't. Someone laughed again. A loud, open laugh this time. She didn't flinch, didn't tighten, just kept standing there, breathing steady, gaze forward. A breeze brushed past her, lifting the edge of her sleeve for a moment. She lowered it without looking, fingers quick and quiet despite the slight tremor of age. The motion was small, efficient, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. No one noticed. Another recruit dropped a bag, cursed, picked it up. Elena bent slightly, steadying the strap for him before he even realized he needed help. He muttered a distracted thanks, already turning away. She didn't correct him, didn't say her name, didn't explain she wasn't there to serve him tea. She listened more than she spoke. Not because she was timid, but because listening gave her more information than talking ever had. Every tone shift, every joke, every insult, she cataloged them without reacting. People assumed silence meant weakness. It didn't. It meant patience. There was something about the way she stood that didn't match the jokes being made about her. Something grounded, like she wasn't trying to prove anything. Like she already knew something they didn't, but nobody looked long enough to catch it. Bet she's never even seen a weapon up close, someone said, not bothering to lower their voice. A few snickers followed. Elena's jaw didn't tighten. Her shoulders didn't tense. She didn't turn. She just waited. And that waiting made the space around her feel strange. Not empty, not weak, just different. Like a quiet room before a storm. In their eyes, she didn't belong here. She was too old, too small, too quiet, too unremarkable. But somewhere deep inside that stillness, there was something else. Something anchored. Something that had nothing to do with rank or titles or what people assumed. They couldn't see it. Not yet. By midday, the yard had filled. New arrivals clustered in loose groups, some loud, some quiet, all pretending not to be nervous. Boots scraped against the ground, radios crackled, and voices overlapped in a constant low hum that never fully faded. Elena remained where she was. A man with a shaved head and an easy grin leaned against a railing nearby, watching her with open curiosity. He tilted his head, eyes scanning her from boots to shoulders. "So," he said casually, "what did you say you were doing here again?" She didn't answer right away. Not because she hadn't heard him, but because she didn't rush responses. "Logistics," he repeated for her. "That means you're keeping track of our coffee supplies, right?" A few people laughed. Not loud, not mean, just enough. She turned her head slowly toward him, met his eyes, held them for a moment, then looked away. The laugh lingered a second too long, then faded. Another voice chimed in from behind her. They must really be desperate for help. That one got a bigger reaction. Someone slapped their knee. Someone else smirked into their hand. Elena adjusted the strap of her bag. One pull, then still. A tall woman with a sharp ponytail stepped closer, eyes narrowed in curiosity more than judgment. "You lost, ma'am?" she asked, her tone patronizing. "The administrative offices are in the other building." "L." Aina didn't correct her. The woman shrugged. "Happens." She walked off. Two men near the benches were talking loudly about prior assignments, about courses they'd passed, about who outranked whom. Their voices were performative, each trying to outdo the other. One of them nodded toward Elena. "You sure she's in the right place? She looks like she should be home with her grandkids." More laughter. This time someone else joined in. A softer laugh. Then another. The sound rippled outward like a wave. Elena stood through it. She shifted her weight slightly, adjusting for the angle of the sun. She raised her chin a fraction, not in defiance, but to keep the light out of her eyes. She didn't blink more than necessary. A man with a heavy accent stepped forward, hands in his pockets, rocking on his heels. "Hey," he said, grinning. "What made you come out of retirement? Community service requirement?" Someone added. That got a louder laugh. She didn't answer. He waited, tapped his foot, then shrugged. "Okay then." But he kept watching her. Another recruit walked past and muttered. "Probably here for the pension." Someone snorted. Elena didn't flinch. What would you have done in that moment? A few feet away, two men had stopped talking altogether. They were watching now, not mocking, just observing. One of them frowned slightly. Someone else whispered, "She hasn't said a word. Is she deaf or just stubborn?" The guesses stacked on top of each other. Elena's breathing stayed even. A sergeant approached, clipboard in hand, scanning the group. His eyes moved from face to face, assessing, measuring. When they landed on Elena, they paused. He frowned. Not at her, just at the idea of her. "You," he said, pointing. She stepped forward. "Yes, sir." Her voice was calm, neutral, clear, stronger than they expected. He blinked once. "What unit are you assigned to?" "Logistics and coordination, sir." He looked her up and down. That explains it. He didn't clarify what that meant. A few people chuckled. He nodded to himself, scribbled something on his clipboard, and moved on. Elena stepped back to her spot. No reaction. Someone whispered, "Ouch." Another muttered, "Harsh." But the laughter didn't come this time. It was quieter now. She took a slow breath through her nose, exhaled through her mouth, barely visible. Her eyes moved, not scanning people, but movement. Who was standing where? How the groups formed and reformed. Where shadows fell. Who was loud? Who was quiet? Who was pretending not to care? Someone dropped a canteen. It rolled across the ground, clattering to a stop near her boots. She bent, smoothly, despite her age, picked it up, and handed it back. The man took it, surprised. "Thanks." She nodded once. He walked away, glancing back over his shoulder. A moment later, another voice cut in. "So, you ever even been on a real base before?" Elena didn't answer. The man laughed awkwardly. "Guess that's a no." "No," someone else says. "Aid." "That's a yes. She's just too polite to tell you you're an idiot." Another laugh, smaller this time. "Would you have spoken up or stayed quiet like she did?" A breeze passed through the yard, carrying the smell of oil and dust. Somewhere, a door slammed. Somewhere else, a radio crackled. Elena's fingers flexed once, slow and controlled. A man with a thick beard approached her, stopping just short of personal space. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look nervous," he said. She met his gaze. "I'm not." She replied that IT was the first thing she'd said in minutes. The silence that followed was heavier than the laughter had been. He blinked, then laughed, but it sounded forced. "Right." He stepped back. People stared. Not mockery this time. Curiosity. Her eyes moved past him, back to the yard. The moment passed, but something had shifted. The afternoon light stretched shadows across the concrete in long, uneven lines. People had started to settle into a quieter rhythm now. Less laughter, more waiting. Elena remained where she was. When she reached for her canteen, the sleeve of her uniform pulled back just enough to reveal a thin, pale line along her forearm. It wasn't dramatic. No jagged edges, no obvious story, just a scar. Clean, deliberate, old. No one commented, but a few people noticed. A woman nearby squinted, then looked away, pretending she hadn't seen anything. A man frowned, as if trying to place something he couldn't quite remember. Elena took a sip of water and rolled her sleeve back down. She didn't hide it. She just didn't display it. A few minutes later, someone bumped into her by accident. Not hard, just careless. She shifted her weight instantly, absorbing the contact without stumbling, feet adjusting before her body had fully moved. It was subtle, too practiced for someone supposedly past their prime. The man muttered an apology. She nodded once, but someone else had seen it. "That was fast," a voice murmured. Elena didn't react. She reached up and tugged her collar slightly, as if it were bothering her. The motion lifted the edge of fabric near her shoulder, revealing a sliver of dark ink beneath. Not enough to identify, just enough to notice. A curved line, a symbol maybe, or part of one. It disappeared again as quickly as it had appeared. Someone leaned toward their friend. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "Nothing." "Never mind." The sound of boots approached from behind. A group of senior personnel passed through the yard, talking among themselves. Their voices were clipped. Efficient. One of them said something Elena didn't quite catch, but she turned anyway. Not dramatically, not obviously, just aware. Her eyes tracked them for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked away. A man near her frowned. Why'd she do that? "Do what?" "Nothing," he said, but his eyes stayed on H. "Oh." Elena adjusted her gloves again. The same precise tug at the wrist. the same smoothing of the seam, the same controlled stillness afterward. It wasn't nervous. It was practiced. Someone near the benches dropped a metal case. It hit the ground with a sharp clang. Several people flinched. Elena didn't. Her shoulders didn't jump. Her breath didn't hitch. Her gaze didn't flick toward the sound. She just stood. A quiet pause followed. Then someone laughed awkwardly. Guess Grandma's tough. But the laughter didn't spread. The shift began quietly. No alarms, no shouting, just a small mistake that didn't look like one at first. A supply truck rolled into the yard, guided by a young corporal who kept checking his tablet, frowning, then checking again. Two others followed behind him, carrying equipment cases that were heavier than they looked. They set them down near the staging area, breathing hard. "Why is this here?" the corporal asked. One of the men shrugged. "That's where the manifest says." Another frowned. "No, this stuff is supposed to be on the north side." "It is the north side," someone said. "No, it isn't." Voices overlapped. People gathered. Fingers pointed at maps, at screens, at the wrong building. Elena watched. Not from the center, from the edge. Someone laughed. Already screwing things up. A few soft chuckles followed. The corporal rubbed his face. "Just move it," he said. "We'll sort it later." Elena took one step forward. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just forward. "That'll block the access lane," she said calmly. The words were simple, unemotional. The corporal blinked. "What?" She didn't raise her voice. Didn't repeat herself. Just pointed. "That truck can't stay there. If you park it here, the emergency route gets cut in half." A pause. Someone snorted. "Emergency route. Relax, Grandma." Elena didn't react. She stepped closer to the tablet in the corporal's hand, not invading his space, just close enough to see. "You're reading the grid backward," she said. He frowned. "No, I'm not." She didn't argue. She reached out and rotated the tablet slightly. "Your orientation's flipped. North is here, not here." The corporal stared, then blinked again, then swiped. "Oh." The sound was quiet. Embarrassed. Someone nearby muttered, "Huh." Elena stepped back. No comment, no smile, just stillness. They moved the truck out a few minutes later. A radio call came through, muffled, distorted. People leaned in to listen. "Say again," someone said. The voice crackled. "You've got the wrong CR. Atesh at checkpoint 3. Groans rippled through the group. "Who signed off on this?" "Doesn't matter now. We'll have to redo the whole thing." Elena looked at the stacked cases, then at the route, then at the gate. She stepped forward again. "Those 3 are fine," she said quietly. Someone scoffed. "You just got here." She didn't answer that. She pointed instead. "The error is in the 4th and 5th crate. They're mislabeled. The weights don't match the manifest." A man laughed. "You can tell that by looking?" Elena crouched, smoothly, despite her 65 years, pressed her hand lightly to the side of one case, then the next. She stood. "Those 2, she said. "They're wrong." The laughter faltered. The corporal hesitated, then opened one. He froze. Someone leaned in. Then another. "Wait," someone said. "How did she?" No one finished the sentence. They opened the 2nd crate. Same result. Silence followed. Not heavy, just unsettled. Elena stepped back again, returning to her place like nothing had happened. People stared. Someone whispered, "That was lucky." Another said, "Twice?" When the colonel arrived, he crossed the yard with measured steps, nodding once to a sergeant, scanning the area with practiced eyes. And then he saw her. Not her face, not her stance, not her silence. He noticed her sleeve, a fraction too low, just enough to reveal the edge of dark ink beneath the fabric. He slowed. His eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in recognition. He stepped closer. Elena felt him before she heard him. The air shifted. The weight of attention shifted. She turned. Calm. Composed. "Yes, sir," she said. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze lowered to her forearm, just for a moment. Just long enough. His shoulders softened. The change was subtle but unmistakable. He looked up at her face, then back to the ink, then back to her. "Morales," he said quietly. Not a question. She met his eyes. "Yes, sir." The colonel inhaled slowly. Then, with no announcement, no raised voice, he stepped back half a pace, straightened, and inclined his head. Not a bow, not a salute, but something close. People noticed. Whispers stopped mid-sentence. Boots froze. The yard seemed to hold its breath. "Did you serve under Captain Reyes?" he asked. Her jaw tightened just slightly. Yes, sir. His eyes softened. I thought so. That was all he said. No explanation. No story. Just that. The silence spread outward like a ripple. Someone whispered, "What does that mean?" No one answered. The colonel looked at her again, this time with something that had not been there before. Respect. Not loud, not performative. Real. You're assigned here now, he asked. Yes, sir. He nodded once, then turned to the others. His voice was calm, even. Proceed. No clarification. No elaboration. But the tone had changed, and everyone felt it. As he walked people stared. Not at him. At her. Someone leaned toward another and whispered, "Do you know what that tattoo means?" Another shook his head. But he did. Elena remained still. She adjusted her sleeve, covered the ink again. And for the first time, no one laughed. No one smirked. No one joked. They just watched. And somehow, without a single word spoken aloud, everyone understood. She had never been lost. They had. The yard did not erupt. There was no cheer, no sudden applause, no dramatic gasps. There was only silence. Not empty silence, not awkward silence, but the kind that presses in on the chest and makes breathing feel louder than it should. People were still standing where they had been, but everything about them had changed. Shoulders that had slouched straightened. Smirks faded. Jaws tightened. A few people swallowed hard. The same men who had laughed earlier now couldn't look away from her. Not because she was doing anything, but because they suddenly understood that she never had been. Elena remained where she was, hands relaxed at her sides, eyes forward. Her posture hadn't changed. Her breathing hadn't changed. She hadn't lifted her chin or squared her shoulders. She didn't need to. One of the men who had joked about her earlier shifted his weight, standing a little straighter. Another uncrossed his arms, then didn't know what to do with his hands. A woman who had dismissed her as lost lowered her voice when she spoke, as if volume itself now felt inappropriate. Someone murmured, "I didn't know." No one replied. The colonel stopped a few steps away from her. He didn't speak. He didn't address the crowd. He didn't explain anything. He simply reached into his pocket. Slowly, deliberately. Everyone watched. He pulled out a small, worn object, a challenge coin, its edges softened with time. He turned it once in his fingers, then stepped forward. Elena looked at him. Calm. Steady. He held the coin out. She didn't move. Not because she didn't understand, but because she was waiting. He placed it gently into her open palm. Not ceremonially. Not dramatically. Just respectfully. Her fingers closed around it. The sound of metal against skin was barely audible, but in the quiet it felt thunderous. No one spoke. The colonel inclined his head again, just slightly. Then he turned and walked away. That was it. No speech, no announcement, no explanation. But the entire yard had changed. Elena looked down at the coin for a moment. Then she slipped it into her pocket and returned her hands to her sides. She did not smile. She did not look around. She did not seek anyone's reaction. She simply stood. And that made it harder, because the respect in the air had nowhere to go. People felt it settle into their bones. A man who had mocked her earlier took a step forward, then stopped. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He didn't know what to say. Another recruit whispered, "She was here the whole time." Someone else replied, "Yeah, Nola." Ugter followed, only understanding. Elena adjusted her gloves, smoothed the seam. The same small, precise motion she had done all day. But now it felt different to those watching. Now it looked like discipline, not nervousness. Control, not weakness. A woman near the benches swallowed and straightened her posture unconsciously. A man near the gate removed his cap for a moment, then put it back on, unsure why he had done it. No one mocked anymore. They couldn't. They didn't see an old woman anymore. They saw something else now. Something earned. Elena lifted her gaze briefly, scanning the yard once more. Not to measure, not to assess. Just to see. And for the first time, people didn't look away. They held her gaze. Not challengingly, not curiously, but quietly, reverently. Then she looked forward again, and the moment settled into the space like a held breath finally released. No one would ever forget it. Not because of what she had done, but because of how she had stood. Nothing extraordinary happened after that. No speeches were made. No questions were asked out loud. No stories were told. Elena simply turned back toward the staging area and resumed what she had been doing before anyone noticed her at all. She checked a manifest. She helped secure a strap. She guided a crate into place with 2 fingers and a quiet word. When someone asked her where something belonged, she answered calmly. When someone hesitated, she waited. She didn't look for eyes on her, but eyes followed her anyway. Not with curiosity, with care. People spoke differently now. Softer, slower. They no longer joked about her being in the wrong place. They no longer assumed. When they addressed her, they used her name. Morales. She answered the same way she always had. Yes. No. Here. There. She did not boast. She did not correct anyone's past behavior. She did not offer explanations. She did not display the coin. She did not reveal the tattoo. She did not tell her story. She simply worked. And in that quiet consistency, something deeper settled. People began to notice the things they had missed before. The way she moved without waste. The way she noticed details before they became problems. The way she waited instead of interrupting. They realized she had always been like this. They just hadn't looked. A man who had laughed earlier now carried an extra case without being asked. A woman who had dismissed her as confused stood a little straighter when she passed. Someone who had whispered about her age now nodded to her with quiet respect. Elena acknowledged them all the same way she always had. With calm. With patience. With dignity. She didn't change. They did. And that was the point. The yard slowly returned to its rhythm. Voices resumed. Movement continued. Life went on. But something invisible had shifted. Something permanent. Because every person there had learned something they would never forget. Not about her. About themselves. And the quiet power of what they had overlooked. True strength does not ask to be seen. It waits, just standing. That is the part most people forget. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply staying where you are when the world tells you that you do not belong. There are heroes around us every day who carry stories no one asks to hear. They do not wear them on their sleeves. They carry them in their posture, in their patience, in their quiet dignity. Age does not diminish valor. Experience does not fade with time. Some of the most important people you will ever meet will never announce themselves. They will stand quietly at the edge of the room. They will absorb the jokes, the stares, the careless words. Not because they are weak, but because they have already learned that strength does not need permission to exist. Earlier they laughed at her. They whispered. They assumed. They decided who she was without ever asking. And she stood there, not shrinking, not fighting, not proving. And the greatest warriors among us are often the ones we never thought to salute. Look closer. Listen harder. Honor those who stood when you weren't watching. Because the next time you see someone standing alone, silent and steady while the world dismisses them, remember Elena Morales. And ask yourself, what am I missing? If you enjoyed this story of courage, dignity, and the unseen veterans among us, please subscribe to USX Stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come. Subscribe now and never miss stories that remind us what true strength looks like.